Good morning. This is week 3 of Social Work 636. And week 3 examines the role of power in organizations with a particular focus on the application of power. The concept of bureaucracy and professional bureaucracies are also presented. The learning objectives for this week are as follows. After completing the activities this week, you should be able to describe the concept of organizational structure, describe different types of power, and we will also talk about authority, describe the elements of bureaucracy and professional bureaucracy. So let's go to the learning resources for this week. There are a large number of outside readings for this week. I have put together a short PowerPoint that concentrates on the first one, authority, power, and conflict in organizations. But please read as many of the readings as you can. There are 2 very short videos this week. And we will also go over slides put together by Dr. Steve Kaufman. So the videos, the first one is how to cope with bureaucracy. It's a short video that talks about the downsides of bureaucracies and that since inevitably there is a percentage of the time when they will not function well, the way for us to deal with bureaucratic systems, and this is talking about large bureaucratic systems in general, is to understand that sometimes that they will not function well. You may or may not agree with this premise. The other video talks about street level bureaucrats based on a book that was written by Michael Lipsky, and it says that many of the workers in the systems are essentially street level bureaucrats. Social workers are included in this description, and that social workers have to take their knowledge and skills and experience and interpret policies in very short time frames with very little information, and what that means as a street level bureaucrat. So let's go specifically to look at the assignment for this week. And the assignment for this week is as follows. Excuse me. What is your position in the hierarchy of your agency? Go back to the agency that you talked about in the first post. There are 2 parts to this exercise. If you are able to access and share an organizational chart, please do so. If not, draw on one of the following examples that have been provided. And then you can identify by circling, marking, or otherwise identified where you would be located on the chart. And then write a short description of the power authority differences that exist between yourself and the person immediately above you. So some of you talked about organizations that you currently work in, some talked about organizations that you previously worked in, and some of you are starting your field experience, so this is a good opportunity to examine the organizational chart. And you would respond to one of your classmates. The original post is due by Thursday. The follow-up post is due by Sunday. Next, let's talk about this very short PowerPoint that I put together, and then we'll go over the slides put together by Dr. Stephen Kaufman. A lot of the discussion in the slides put together by Kaufman and some of the readings talks about organizations as bureaucracies. And this is based on the fact that most of our nonprofit organizations are organized as bureaucracies. There are other organizational structures. Hopefully, we will have a chance to talk about them during this course. The disadvantage of the change to the larger bureaucracies is that they are less personable, they're more impersonable. They have less understanding, compassion, and pay less attention to the individual needs, especially of the workers. But there are advantages. There is legal authority given to persons in managerial positions and administration. The policies are considered to be fairer because they are less based on individuals, but based on achieving the objectives of the organization. Reward is given based on production versus favoritism. Efficiency is increased, and there is the reduction of nepotism. I did not say the elimination of nepotism because you can see in some bureaucratic organizations that this may still exist. Power versus authority. So authority is the legal, designated, legitimate, formal right to give commands aimed at molding workers to achieve the objectives of the organization. Power, on the other hand, is the ability to exercise control over others and is a more personal trait versus a legal designation. It's a larger concept than authority, and someone may not have the authority in an organization, but they do have organizational power. So, in the one article, the first article that I concentrated this PowerPoint on, there are discussions of types of authority. So there's managerial authority, and that is responsibility given for acquiring, deploying, and controlling resources. Staff authority, and the article says that everyone has staff authority, and that's the ability to make suggestions and recommendations for solving problems, procedural changes, and ways to make a position more effective and satisfying. The article goes on to say that most people do not exercise this authority, and it relates to the video on street level bureaucracy. Situation authority is delegated to the staff expert. Sometimes that expert can begin to have more organizational authority than is what is granted on an organizational chart, which can lead to some conflicts. And operative authority, and the individuals make decisions on how, in what order, and tools needed to carry out an assignment. So what's power again? You can have relational or legal power, whether it's based on knowledge or formal organizational authority. It is accepted by workers in the organization. Persons can have reward power, and that is control over the ability to dispense benefits. Coercive power, the ability to punish. Referent power is given because people identify with someone in a position. The example was given as young people who identify with a star basketball player, but somehow we identify with this person in authority, so we give them referent power. Charismatic power, or the cult of personality. We react to the person as an individual based on something that's about them. And then the expert power. Conflict is not always seen as a bad thing in an organization. We don't want organizations to function as just a group of yes people. Sometimes we hope that when people see ways to do things better, that they are willing to speak up. And this can lead to some conflict, but again, not all conflict is bad. It can lead to discussions that need to be had in an organization, but conflict needs to be managed. So there is the interpersonal. The individual worker is struggling with their role in an organization, whether they fit in, levels of burnout, all that has to do with interpersonal conflict issues. Interpersonal is when it involves two or more workers. Hopefully this can be resolved in supervision, but it does happen. Not all teams function as one, and team building exercises and working on conflict between individuals is necessary. Intragroup conflict, organizational strain. It could be role, people exceeding their boundaries. It could be based on issues that are occurring, or it could be interactional conflict between members in a team, conflict between units, which leads to intergroup conflict, and that's differences in departmental objectives, could be rivalry between different departments even. How can you handle it? You can try to suppress it, but I can guarantee you that at some point it would rise its ugly head again, so that's not a good way to handle conflict. You can try to smooth it over, and this may work for a while. You can avoid it, which again doesn't help in the long run. You can do bargaining and compromising as you do with any differences between individuals. Sometimes you need to bring in a third party to an organization, an outside person who could do an organizational analysis. You can co-opt, which means you try to bring someone over to your side. You could do it a variety of ways. I think one of the examples given in the article is just to do a merger. You could do a reorganization. There are many ways to do co-optation. You can move people around with job rotation. You can be confront, and sometimes you do have to confront things head on. You can also do structuring interaction between groups. And the examples here were more to limit the interaction between groups of people. So you structure it that way. But an integrated problem solving approach, which is more attuned to the way we function as social workers, is to sit down, look at the reasons for the conflict, and try to resolve those issues. Not everybody will win, but hopefully everyone will be satisfied because they had a role in the solution. This only works if people are willing to go that route. It will not work if people are not willing to listen to each other. So these PowerPoint slides are based on the article called Authority, Power, and Conflict in Organization, Analysis of the Impact of the Functional Relationship in Organization Performance. There are two sets of slides by Dr. Steve Kaufman, one on organizations and program development, organizational structure. So let's go over the first one. This gives the data sources. The agenda is to look at organizational structure and management. Organizations are complex. There are many integrated parts, and the human element cannot be taken out of organizations. And there is an interconnection in organizations. So there's the personal, but there's also the professional. So you can look at that organizational chart. Why do we need an organizational structure? All organizations have a management structure that determines the relationships, whether they are functions and positions, and subdivides and delegates roles, responsibility, and authority to carry out defined tasks and avoid chaos. Types of organizational structure: you can have a tall organizational structure, a flat one, a virtual one, or one that has very fluid boundaries. So if you have a tall organizational structure, which often is characterized in bureaucracies, they are large, complex organizations. In its simplest form, a tall structure results in one long chain of command similar to the military. There is someone at the top. As an organization grows, the number of management levels increase, and the structure gets taller. And in a tall structure, managers form many ranks and each has a small area of control. A flat organizational structure, there's fewer management levels, with each level controlling a broad area or group. Flat organizations focus on empowering employees rather than adhering to the chain of command. And by encouraging autonomy and self-direction, flat structures attempt to tap into employees' creative talents and to solve problems through collaboration. So these next slides are examples of different types of organizational structures. And you will look at your organizational charts and determine what kind of organization you are a part of. A virtual organizational structure can be thought of as a way in which an organization uses information and communication technologies to replace or augment some aspect of the organization. People who are virtually organized primarily interact by electronic means. For example, many customer help desks link customers and consultants together via telephone or the internet, and problems may be solved without ever bringing people together face to face. Many of our organizations now have hybrid structures. And then there are boundary-less organizational structures. And it's a newer approach to organizational design. It's an organization that's not defined by or limited to the horizontal, vertical, or external boundaries imposed by a predefined structure. It behaves more like an organism, encouraging better integration among employees and closer partnerships with stakeholders. It's highly visible, highly responsive, and draws on talent wherever it's found. There are organizations where you can walk into the organization and you would not be able to tell who's in charge, that there are no assigned desks, people work in teams based on projects versus their position in the organization. And so the structure is very, very fluid. And those organizations tend to be much more creative based and rely much more on the talent of the individuals in the organization. So what are some of the features of an organizational structure? They determine the manner and extent to which roles, power, and responsibilities are delegated, depends on objectives and strategies, and acts as a perspective through which individuals can see their organization and its environment. Why are structures important? They are important because they impact effectiveness and efficiency. They reduce redundant actions. Hopefully, we don't have a lot of duplication. They promote teamwork, improve communication, and contribute to success or failure. Chain of command is the line of authority that extends from upper level of an organization to the lowest level of the organization and clarifies who reports to whom. An authority is granted. If you look at an organizational chart, then you can see often how authority is granted. Authority is the rights inherent in a managerial position to tell people what to do and expect them to do it. Responsibility, on the other hand, is the obligation or expectation to perform, which brings with it accountability. Unity of command is the concept that a person should have only one boss and report only to him or her, or again, they or them, depending on pronouns used. I was in an organization where I reported to two bosses, and that can be a source of confusion at times because the policies of one person or the priorities of one person are not the priorities of the other. Delegation is the assignment of authority to another person to carry out specific duties. So what are some of the components of an organizational structure? We have the administration, we have the operating core, which is often seen as supervisors and frontline staff. We have the support staff, we have the technological structure. It could be research and development, could be evaluation in organizations. And one of the articles looks at Mintzberg's organizational elements. So we have the operating core, which are the employees who perform the basic work related to the production of products and services. We have the strategic apex, the top level managers who are charged with the overall responsibility for the organization. We have the middle line, midline staff who are the managers who connect the operating core to the strategic apex. We have the technostructure, which are our analysts who have the responsibility for erecting certain forms of standardization in the organization. And we have the support staff, people who fill the staff units who provide indirect services to the organization. And again, here is another example of some members of the unit in a manufacturing firm. And this goes into further detail about the administration, their tasks and concerns, supervisors, their tasks and concerns, direct care staff, support staff, and the clients and community members. There are organizational charts that would put the constituent groups, primarily the clients and the broader community, at the top of the organizational chart versus the administration at the top of the organizational chart. In the second set of slides by Dr. Kaufman, this looks at how the organization does its work, the system processing, system maintaining, and system changing. What factors lie under the organization's success more than any others? What do you think? One is power. We talked about what is power already, but we have to look at power, its bases and types, its indicators, enablers, and assessment instruments, how power enhances the leaders, and self-empowerment. So, what is power again? It's a measure of a person's potential to get others to do what he or she wants them to do, as to avoid being forced to do what he or she does not want to do. So that's one way of looking at power. Power is the potential to influence individuals and groups as well as organizational outcome. May be an adequate concept to work with. Influence can be both on the covert side, attitudes, values, or thinking, or on the overt part, behavior and actions of persons. Again, someone may have power, but not have the authority granted to them in an organizational chart. So it's good to know, to understand your organization in terms of where does the power actually lie? Where is the formal power and who has the informal power in your organization? So Dr. Kaufman's slides talk about the basis of power a little differently than I did in my slide, but mentions some of the same aspects. One is coercive, and that's based on position, closest to the power source, the amount of charisma, ability to punish, personal relationships, and ability to withhold or deprive information, or could be of this persuasive type based on expertise, competence, role modeling, ability to reward, level of being helpful and caring, and information. Power dynamics. How do you identify or recognize power? In an organizational unit, there's the individual, the role, the leaders, the team, and the organization. At the individual level, it's that feeling of empowerment and enablers, persuasive power, managerial style, and behavior. There's the role again, role efficiency, leaders, the leadership function, and whether that leader is transformational, which is a specific type of leader. In terms of the team functioning, and the organization, its structure, the ethos, climate, and organizational culture. And there are ways to assess culture in an organization. Just as individuals, groups have culture, organizations develop their own culture over time. How can power be enhanced? By building professionalism, and that's through competence building, reward systems, feedback systems, and level of professionalism. Teamwork, having strong teams and teams that are self-governing. Formalization, satisfying task, rules and procedure, structure, and management systems in place. Expert power, and task clarity and autonomy. So, self-empowerment. These lessons came from Mahatma Gandhi in terms of self-empowerment, developing one's own strong identity, break out of the narrow or false identities, expand your identity to larger identities, going back to self whenever in doubt, and need to go beyond the self and serve other individuals, groups, and the society. How do you give power to the group? Decentralize as much of the structure as possible. Give people a voice, which means increasing the democratic process, and again, reducing concentration, giving delegation, being able to delegate to others, devolution, and privatization. So these are all dimensions of power sharing. So with that, these are the concepts for the week, the objectives for the week. Please do as many of the readings as you can. I know there are a lot of readings, but all of them provide additional information on looking at organizations' power, authority, and how social workers can function in organizations. Look at the videos. I look forward to reading your assignments for this week. If you have any questions, please get them to me as quickly as possible, and have a wonderful week.